The conference room aboard the orbital station Unity fell silent as Ambassador Kethavar's scaled fingers drummed against the polished metal table. His yellow serpentine eyes fixed on Captain Elena Vasquez, who sat opposite him with the calm composure that had made her Earth's most respected military strategist. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. "Captain Vasquez," Kethavar hissed, his forked tongue testing the air, "your species has enjoyed the protection of the Galactic Coalition for nearly 3 decades. Now, when we face our darkest hour, you dare question our reasonable request?" Elena's dark eyes never wavered from the reptilian ambassador's gaze. At 35, she had earned her rank through brilliant tactical thinking and an uncanny ability to read alien psychology. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, but nothing could hide the steel in her spine or the fire in her voice when she spoke. 2 million human lives is not a reasonable request, Ambassador. It's a death sentence disguised as conscription. Dr. James Hartwell, Earth's chief xenobiologist and diplomat, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The older man had spent years building relationships with the coalition species, and watching those bridges burn made his stomach churn. His graying beard couldn't hide the worry lines that had deepened over the past weeks of negotiations. "Perhaps we could discuss alternative forms of support," Hartwell offered diplomatically. "Earth's manufacturing capabilities, our technological innovations in energy production, our agricultural surplus." General Nix Torvin's chittering laugh cut through his words like broken glass. The insectoid commander's compound eyes glittered with alien amusement as her mandibles clicked together. Her exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles, and her forearms gestured dismissively at the human delegation. "Your factories cannot hold a plasma rifle, Doctor. Your crops cannot charge enemy positions. We need bodies, warm bodies that can bleed and die while our superior forces complete the real work of war." Zara Kim, sitting beside Elena, felt her jaw clench at the casual dismissal of human life. As Earth's premier combat engineer, she had designed defensive systems that had protected human colonies from raiders and pirates. Her auburn hair caught the artificial light as she leaned forward, her green eyes blazing with controlled anger. "Superior forces," Zara's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Your superior forces have been locked in this war with the Void Swarm for over 2 centuries. If you were so superior, wouldn't you have won by now?" Kethavar's hood flared in irritation, the colorful display marking his rising anger. "Insolent mammal! You know nothing of war on a galactic scale. Your entire species has never faced a threat beyond your own pathetic solar system." Elena raised her hand slightly, and Zara fell silent, though her hands remained clenched into fists. The captain had learned to read the subtle dynamics of interspecies politics, and she could sense the desperation beneath the alien's arrogance. "Let me understand this correctly," Elena said, her voice steady and measured. "The Void Swarm has pushed your combined fleets back to the core worlds. You've lost entire star systems, billions of coalition citizens, and your military leadership is so desperate that you're demanding cannon fodder from a species you consider primitive. Does that accurately summarize the situation?" General Torvin's antennae twitched with barely contained rage. "We do not require your analysis of our strategic position, human. We require your compliance." "And if we refuse?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Ambassador Kethavar's smile revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Then Earth will be classified as a hostile, non-aligned world. The Coalition will withdraw all protection, cease all trade agreements, and impose a complete quarantine around your system. When the Void Swarm inevitably finds you, you will face them alone." Dr. Hartwell paled at the implication. Earth's colonies, scattered across nearby systems, depended on coalition trade routes and protection. Without that support, humanity would be isolated and vulnerable. "You're talking about economic warfare," Hartwell protested. "That violates a dozen coalition treaties. Treaties that only apply to member species," Kethavar replied smoothly. "Refuse our request, and humanity will no longer be considered for membership. You will become what you've always been to us, an irrelevant, backwater species playing at civilization." Elena studied the alien faces around the table, reading the micro-expressions and body language that her years of training had taught her to interpret. Desperation masked as superiority. Fear disguised as aggression. They weren't negotiating from a position of strength. They were drowning and demanding that humanity jump in to save them. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. 72 Earth hours, General Torvin clicked. After that, the isolation protocols begin immediately. As the alien delegation filed out of the conference room, their various forms of locomotion, creating a symphony of clicks, hisses, and scraping sounds, Elena remained seated. Zara moved closer, her hand briefly touching Elena's shoulder in a gesture of support that spoke of their long partnership, both professional and personal. "They're scared," Zara observed quietly. "Really scared." "Terrified," Elena agreed. "Which makes them dangerous." Dr. Hartwell slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. "What choice do we have? Without coalition protection, we're sitting ducks when the void swarm arrives." Elena stood and walked to the viewport that dominated one wall of the conference room. Earth hung below them, a blue-green jewel against the star-filled void. Somewhere down there, families were going about their daily lives, unaware that their fate was being decided in a sterile conference room orbiting their homeworld. "There's always a choice, James. The question is whether we're willing to pay the price for making it." Zara joined her at the viewport, following her gaze to the planet below. "You're thinking about something. I can see those wheels turning." Elena's reflection smiled grimly in the transparent aluminum. "I'm thinking about history, Zara. About every time someone underestimated humanity because we seemed primitive or backward or irrelevant." "You want to give them their 2 million soldiers?" Hartwell said, his voice heavy with resignation. "I want to give them exactly what they asked for," Elena replied, but her tone suggested something far more complex than simple compliance. "They want human soldiers to serve as expendable troops in their war. They think we're weak, primitive, and desperate enough to send our people to die for their protection. Aren't we?" Hartwell asked quietly. Elena turned from the viewport, her expression hardening into something that reminded Zara why her lover had earned her reputation as one of Earth's most formidable military minds. "They made one critical error in their calculations, James. They assumed that because we've never fought a galactic war, we don't know how to fight at all. They looked at our technology and saw primitive weapons. They looked at our tactics and saw limited experience. They looked at our history and saw a species that had never faced a real threat." Zara felt a chill run down her spine as understanding began to dawn. "But they didn't look deep enough." "No, they didn't." Elena's smile was sharp as a blade. "They didn't see the species that climbed out of caves and conquered an entire planet. They didn't see the civilization that turned a ball of rock and water into a thriving world through pure stubborn will. They didn't see the people who looked at the impossible and decided to do it anyway." Dr. Hartwell frowned, still not grasping the full implication. "Elena, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to give the Galactic Coalition exactly what they want, James. 2 million human soldiers to fight in their war." She paused, her gaze returning to Earth. "I just don't think they're going to like what they get. The next 72 hours would reshape the galaxy in ways that no one in that conference room could have predicted. The Galactic Coalition thought they were conscripting cannon fodder from a primitive species. They were about to discover that humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology or its numbers. It was its refusal to accept that anything was impossible." As Elena, Zara, and Dr. Hartwell left the conference room to begin the most important preparations in human history, none of them noticed the small surveillance device attached to the underside of the table. The void swarm had agents everywhere, and Queen Commander Zixathera was very interested in this species that the Coalition considered so expendable. The war was about to change in ways that would surprise everyone involved. 6 months after the conscription demand, the galaxy had learned to fear a sound that had never existed before in Coalition space: the war cry of human soldiers charging into battle. What had begun as the Coalition's desperate grab for cannon fodder had transformed into something that would be studied in military academies for generations to come. Lieutenant Commander Rico Delacroix stood on the bridge of the human vessel Indomitable, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The 40-year-old naval officer had spent his entire career preparing for battles that his superiors thought would never come. His weathered face bore the scars of countless training exercises, but his gray eyes held the sharp intelligence that had made him Captain Elena's chosen fleet coordinator. "Status report, Commander," came Elena's voice through the comm system. She was aboard the flagship Defiance, coordinating what the Coalition had dubbed Operation Human Shield, though they had quickly stopped using that name after the first few engagements. "Void Swarm forces are moving into the Kepler sector as predicted," Rico replied, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. "They're following the same pattern they've used for the past 2 centuries. Mass formation, overwhelming firepower, no tactical creativity whatsoever." Sergeant Aria Blackwood crouched in the maintenance tunnels of Coalition Station Omega-7, her team of human infiltrators moving like shadows through the alien architecture. At 28, she had been Earth's most decorated Special Forces operator before the war began. Her platinum blonde hair was hidden beneath advanced camouflage tech that Zara Kim had personally modified for stealth operations. "Phoenix Leader, to command," she whispered into her throat mic. "We're in position. The Void Swarm thinks they're about to capture the station's central command. They have no idea we've been living in their walls for the past 3 weeks. The Void Swarm had evolved beyond individual consciousness eons ago. They operated as a collective intelligence, each drone sharing information instantaneously across vast distances. Queen Commander Zixathera was the primary node of this hive mind, a creature of pure thought inhabiting a body that had been rebuilt countless times for war. She floated in her command chamber, tendrils of neural interface connecting her directly to her fleet. For 2 centuries she had studied Coalition tactics. They were predictable, rigid, bound by protocols and honor codes that made them easy to defeat. But these humans were different. Analysis incomplete. She pulsed to her subordinate nodes. Human warfare patterns do not match any known galactic standard. They fight without honor. They strike without warning. They adapt without precedent. Captain Joran Steele had been a merchant marine before the war, running cargo between Earth's outer colonies. Now he commanded a fleet of converted civilian ships that the Coalition military had dismissed as improvised junk. His weathered hands gripped the command chair as alarms blared throughout his ship. "All units, this is Steelhammer Actual," he broadcasted to his flotilla. "Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to survive until tomorrow so we can fight dirty again." The human ships moved in patterns that violated every principle of galactic naval warfare. They used civilian vessels as decoys, converted mining ships as surprise attack platforms, and turned cargo containers into guided missiles. Where Coalition forces fought in orderly formations, humans swarmed like angry hornets, unpredictable and deadly. Dr. Mira Santos had been working without sleep for 72 hours straight, her laboratory aboard the research vessel Innovation, humming with frantic activity. The former university professor had become humanity's premier weapons specialist by necessity, taking alien technology and modifying it in ways that horrified and impressed her Coalition counterparts. "Field test results are beyond our expectations," she reported to Elena via encrypted channel. "The psychological warfare protocols are working exactly as Dr. Hartwell predicted. The Void Swarm's hive mind is having difficulty processing our chaotic tactical patterns." The first major engagement had been in the Vega system, where Coalition High Command had assigned human forces to hold the line while evacuating civilian populations. It was supposed to be a delaying action, buy time for the real military forces to regroup while the expendable humans died heroically. Instead, the humans had turned 3 planets into a nightmare for the invading Void Swarm. They fought from abandoned buildings, from sewers, from the shadows of ruined cities. They used improvised explosives, jury-rigged alien weapons, and tactics that seemed to come from the darkest corners of human imagination. Sergeant Blackwood's voice crackled through Elena's earpiece as she coordinated the defense of Station Omega-7. "They expected us to hold the main corridors and die with honor. Instead, we're everywhere they don't expect us to be. Control rooms, life support systems, even their own ships when they dock. The Void Swarm drones had been programmed for conventional warfare. They knew how to fight enemies who met them head-on, who followed predictable patterns, who valued honor over victory. They had no programming for enemies who hid in ceiling vents, who turned their own technology against them, who seemed to treat war as a puzzle to be solved rather than a ritual to be observed. Their adaptation speed is unprecedented, Zixthara pulsed to her fleet commanders. Each engagement produces new tactical variations. They learn from defeat faster than we can process victory. Rico's tactical display showed the battle for the Kepler sector unfolding exactly as the humans had planned. The Void Swarm forces were advancing in their traditional overwhelming wave, expecting the coalition defenders to meet them in organized formations. Instead, they found empty space where enemy fleets should have been, and sudden devastating attacks from directions they hadn't considered possible. Coalition Command, this is Delacroix, Rico reported with barely contained satisfaction. Enemy forces are proceeding into the kill box as planned. Request permission to spring the trap. The trap had been Elena's idea, refined by weeks of observation and psychological analysis. Humans had studied the Void Swarm's patterns and realized their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. The hive mind made them incredibly coordinated, but also made them predictable. They couldn't conceive of strategies that didn't make logical sense. Permission granted, came the reply from Admiral Kethvar, whose tone had changed dramatically since the first human victories. The reptilian commander no longer spoke of humans as expendable primitives. All human units execute Operation Chaos Theory. The space around Kepler Station erupted into violence that defied all conventional understanding of naval warfare. Human ships emerged from behind asteroids, from within nebula clouds, from trajectories that should have been impossible. They struck fast and hard, then disappeared before the Void Swarm could coordinate a response. Zara Kim watched the battle from the engineering deck of the Defiance, her modifications to human technology proving their worth in real combat. She had taken coalition energy shields and made them adaptive. She had converted mining lasers into precision weapons. She had turned human creativity loose on alien science and created tools of war that neither species could have developed alone. Elena, she called over the battle chatter, you need to see this. The Void Swarm is trying to retreat, but they can't coordinate it properly. Our chaos tactics are breaking down their hive mind communications. On the main display, the impossible was happening. The Void Swarm, which had conquered half the galaxy through overwhelming coordination and relentless advance, was falling back in confusion. Their drones were making individual decisions, breaking formation, some even attacking each other as conflicting signals flooded their shared consciousness. Dr. Hartwell had been right about the psychological aspect of warfare. The Void Swarm's greatest strength, their unity of thought, became a vulnerability when faced with an enemy that refused to think logically. Human unpredictability was like a virus in their collective mind, spreading chaos through their perfectly ordered consciousness. All coalition forces, this is Captain Vasquez. Elena's voice rang out across the fleet communications. The Void Swarm is retreating from Kepler sector. This is the first major tactical withdrawal they've made in over 50 years. The celebration that erupted across coalition space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard. Species that had fought the Void Swarm for centuries without a single significant victory were watching the impossible happen. The tide of war was turning, and it was turning because of the species they had dismissed as primitive cannon fodder. Queen Commander Zixthara felt something she had never experienced in her millennia of existence: doubt. The perfect certainty of the hive mind was cracking under the pressure of human unpredictability. Her drones were developing individual thought patterns, questioning orders, even experiencing what could only be called fear. Analysis required, she pulsed desperately to her remaining fleet commanders. How does a species defeat superior numbers, superior technology, superior coordination through randomness and chaos? But there was no answer in the collective consciousness. The Void Swarm had spent eons perfecting the art of organized warfare, and they had no framework for understanding an enemy that seemed to thrive on disorganization. Captain Steele's converted merchant vessels had become the stuff of legend among coalition forces. His junk fleet, had destroyed 3 Void Swarm dreadnoughts using nothing but creativity, determination, and a complete disregard for conventional tactics. His ships fought like drunken pirates, appearing where they shouldn't be, striking where they weren't expected, and vanishing before retaliation could be organized. Steel hammer to all units. His voice crackled with exhaustion and triumph. The enemy is learning to fear us. Every time they see human ships on their sensors, they hesitate. That hesitation is costing them battles. The war was far from over, but something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The coalition forces that had demanded human cannon fodder were now begging for human leadership. Species that had considered themselves superior were studying human tactics and trying to learn the art of creative warfare. Elena stood in the same conference room where the conscription demand had been made. But now she faced a very different group of alien commanders. Ambassador Kethvar's hood was lowered in a gesture of respect. General Torvin's mandibles clicked with what could only be called admiration. "Captain Vasquez," Kethvar said, his voice lacking any trace of its former arrogance. "The Coalition High Command has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership status, with representation on the Military Council and the Strategic Planning Committee." Elena smiled, but it was not a smile of triumph. It was the smile of someone who had proven a point that should never have needed proving. "With respect, Ambassador, we didn't fight this war to earn your respect or your membership. We fought it because it was the right thing to do. Because when the galaxy was threatened, humanity chose to stand up and fight back." Zara stepped forward, her hand finding Elena's in a gesture that spoke of the partnership that had helped save the galaxy. "The question now is what we do next. The Void Swarm is wounded but not defeated. They'll adapt to our tactics eventually." "Then we'll adapt faster," Elena replied. "That's what humans do. We adapt, we survive, and we find a way to win against impossible odds." The Galactic Coalition had drafted humans into war believing they were gaining expendable soldiers. Instead, they had awakened something that would reshape warfare throughout the galaxy. Humanity had proven that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. Sometimes the greatest weapon is the refusal to accept that defeat is inevitable. As the meeting concluded and the alien commanders filed out with new respect in their eyes, Elena and Zara remained behind. The war continued, but humanity had claimed its place among the stars not through superior firepower, but through the one thing that no amount of technology could replicate: the human spirit that turned every impossible situation into just another problem to be solved. The galaxy would never be the same, and the Void Swarm was about to learn that their biggest mistake hadn't been underestimating human technology or human numbers. Their biggest mistake had been underestimating the human capacity for finding a way to win when victory seemed impossible.